I honestly believed I had already witnessed every possible form of HOA nonsense, but Karen Whitmore managed to prove me completely wrong. As the self-declared president of the Sunset Ridge Homeowners Association, she had transformed what should have been routine neighborhood governance into her own private monarchy. What began as a minor disagreement over landscaping spiraled into her insisting that I cover her personal electricity bill and ultimately calling 911 when I refused. The whole ordeal started 3 months earlier, right after I moved into what I assumed was a quiet, well-kept suburban community. The homes looked pleasant, the roads were spotless, and the HOA dues appeared fair. What I had no idea about was that Karen had been ruling the association like a tyrant for nearly 5 years, facing almost no resistance from the other board members, most of whom had long since stopped trying to challenge her authority. The first warning sign appeared during my introduction to the neighborhood rules. Karen showed up at my front door holding a thick 3-inch binder stuffed with regulations I had never seen in the official HOA paperwork. Dressed in crisply ironed khakis and a polo shirt, clipboard clutched firmly in her hand, she explained that she had upgraded the community standards during her time as president. Now, if you look at section 12(4), she said, flipping through pages with military-like precision, lawn maintenance must be completed every Saturday between 8 o'clock a.m. and 10 o'clock a.m. no exceptions. I personally inspect each property on Sunday mornings to confirm compliance. I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. The original HOA documents clearly stated that lawns should be kept maintained, but nowhere did they dictate specific days or time windows. Karen's smile stiffened. Those guidelines are outdated, she replied sharply. I've improved them to protect our community's property values. That moment should have told me to start keeping records of every interaction. But I foolishly assumed I could manage one overly enthusiastic HOA president. That assumption turned out to be a major mistake. Things truly went downhill when I hired a professional landscaping company to plant native vegetation in my front yard. I had done everything by the book, researched local ordinances, secured the proper city permits, and reviewed the original HOA covenants to ensure full compliance. The plants I chose were drought-resistant, attractive, and completely legal according to every official source I checked. The morning after the installation, Karen appeared, her face red with barely contained outrage. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" she snapped, gesturing aggressively toward my new garden. "Those plants are not on the approved landscaping list." I stepped outside holding my copy of the HOA covenants. According to these documents, homeowners are allowed to plant any drought-resistant native species, I said. "These California poppies and lavender bushes meet all the requirements," she scoffed. "Those covenants are old," she fired back, producing her ever-present clipboard. "I've created updated landscaping rules that require pre-approval for any changes. You need to remove these immediately and replace them with approved grass varieties." I kept my voice steady. "Can you show me where these updated rules were legally approved by the HOA board?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "I am the HOA board," she said coldly. "I make the decisions here, and I'm telling you those plants have to go." That was when it finally clicked. I wasn't dealing with someone confused about policy, I was dealing with someone who genuinely believed her title gave her unlimited power. Karen had fully convinced herself that being HOA president meant she could invent rules on the fly and enforce them without any legal process or homeowner consent. Over the following weeks, things escalated quickly. Violation notices began appearing on my door almost every day, each more ridiculous than the last. She fined me for leaving trash cans visible for more than 30 minutes, for parking my own car in my driveway at unauthorized times, and even for having curtains that were supposedly the wrong shade of white. Every notice included heavier fines, none of which were supported by the actual HOA documents. When I refused to acknowledge or pay these imaginary penalties, Karen's behavior became even more extreme. She started showing up outside my house multiple times a day, snapping photos from every angle, and leaving long handwritten notes, detailing my continued refusal to follow community standards. The situation reached its breaking point when I opened my mailbox and found a bill for $437.62. It wasn't an HOA assessment or a fine, it was Karen's personal electric bill from Pacific Gas and Electric. A sticky note was attached that read, "Your ongoing non-compliance has required me to spend additional hours managing your violations. You are responsible for reimbursing me for the extra electricity used by my home office." I actually laughed when I read it. The nerve of it was almost admirable. Somehow, Karen had decided that her obsession with policing me was my responsibility to fund. Later that afternoon, I walked over to her house with the bill in hand. She answered the door wearing rubber gloves and holding a spray bottle, clearly in the middle of one of her intense cleaning routines. "I think this was mistakenly put in my mailbox," I said, holding up her electric bill. Her face brightened with smug satisfaction. "No mistake at all," she replied. "As I explained, your intentional violations have created a significant workload for me. I've spent countless hours documenting your behavior, researching penalties, and communicating with city offices regarding your non-compliance. My electricity usage has gone up substantially." I stared at her, trying to wrap my head around the logic. "Karen, you can't charge homeowners for your personal utility bills. That's not how any of this works." She ignored me completely. "Based on my calculations, you owe me for 3 months of increased usage, plus an administrative processing fee. Payment is due within 10 business days, or I'll pursue legal action." "I'm not paying your electric bill," I said firmly. "This is harassment, and it needs to stop." Her smug expression vanished, replaced by icy rage. "We'll see about that," she snapped, slamming the door shut. I knew then that she wasn't done, but I still underestimated just how far she was willing to go. 2 days later, while I was working from home, I heard sirens approaching. I looked out the window and saw a police car stop directly in front of my house. 2 officers stepped out and headed toward my front door. Across the street, Karen burst out of her house, practically giddy as she rushed over to join them on my porch. I opened the door before they could knock. "Good afternoon, officers," I said. "Is there a problem?" The older officer, a calm man in his 50s, glanced down at his notepad. "We received a report regarding theft of services and refusal to pay legally required fees," the officer explained. "The caller claims you owe money to the Homeowners Association and are refusing to pay." I glanced past them at Karen, who stood a few steps back with her arms folded and a smug, triumphant smile on her face. "I'm fully up to date on all my HOA dues," I replied. "My automatic payment processed last week." "That's not what this is about," Karen cut in sharply, moving closer. "He owes me $437.62 for additional administrative costs caused by his ongoing violations. When someone refuses to pay legally mandated fees, that's theft of services." The younger officer frowned. "Ma'am, are you saying he owes this money to the Homeowners Association?" "No," Karen corrected. "He owes it to me personally. I had to do extra work because of him. My electricity usage went up. Running my home office to manage his violations." The officers exchanged a look, and I could practically see the moment realization dawned. The older officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we cannot arrest someone for refusing to pay your personal electric bill. That's a civil issue, not a criminal one." Karen's face flushed crimson. "But he's stealing services," she insisted. "I performed administrative work, and he won't pay me." "Did he ask you to perform that work?" the younger officer asked. "Well, no." "Did he sign any agreement agreeing to pay you?" "Not exactly." "Then this is not a criminal matter," the older officer said firmly. "If you believe someone owes you money, your option is small claims court. We do not arrest people over personal billing disputes." I watched Karen's carefully constructed fantasy collapse in real time. She had truly believed that her title gave her the power to have me arrested for refusing to pay her utility bill. "But I'm the HOA president," she protested. "I have the authority to assess fees." "Ma'am," the older officer said, his patience clearly wearing thin, "being HOA president does not allow you to charge residents for your personal expenses. If you continue making false emergency reports, you could face charges for misuse of emergency services." After the officers left, Karen stood frozen in my driveway for several minutes, staring at my house with a mix of rage and disbelief. I watched from inside as she finally stormed back across the street, muttering under her breath. I assumed that would be the end of it, but her public humiliation only fueled her obsession. Over the next week, her harassment intensified to almost comical extremes. She began leaving multiple violation notices each day, each more absurd than the last. I was cited for aggressive landscaping, choices that intimidate neighbors, for owning non-approved outdoor furniture, and for maintaining a driveway that reflects sunlight in a disruptive manner. The imaginary fines skyrocketed. 5004. Environmental noncompliance, $750 for architectural insubordination, and $1,000 for willful disregard of community harmony. When I continued to ignore her fabricated penalties, Karen escalated to what she clearly believed was her ultimate move. She called 911 again, claiming I was deliberately destroying community property values through malicious noncompliance and demanding my immediate arrest for what she called grand theft of neighborhood equity. The same two officers responded, and this time their patience was gone. "Ma'am, this is the third time this month you've contacted us over civil disputes with your neighbor," the older officer said sternly. "We've already explained that these are not criminal matters, but he's causing thousands of dollars in damage to our property values," Karen argued desperately. "That has to be vandalism. Having plants you dislike is not vandalism," the younger officer replied. "And property values are not something a person can steal." That was the moment I decided enough was enough. Karen had completely lost touch with reality, and her behavior was preventing me from peacefully enjoying my own home. I had meticulously documented everything, every violation notice, every fake fine, every interaction. It was time for real consequences. The following morning, I filed a formal complaint with the State Department of Real Estate, the agency responsible for overseeing HOA governance. I also submitted a harassment report to the local police department and sent a certified letter to every homeowner in the association, detailing Karen's unauthorized rule changes and her attempts to collect personal payments. The fallout was immediate and devastating. It turned out I wasn't alone. Several homeowners had quietly endured Karen's fabricated rules and arbitrary fines, but were too intimidated to speak up. Once they realized others were experiencing the same treatment, the silence broke. Within 2 weeks, enough residents had signed a petition demanding an emergency board meeting and a vote of no confidence. The Department of Real Estate launched a formal investigation into Karen's conduct, focusing on her unauthorized regulations and personal fee collections. The emergency meeting was held on a Tuesday night at the community center, and nearly every homeowner showed up. Karen arrived looking confident, clearly believing she could talk her way out of the situation. "I don't understand why everyone is upset," she began, standing at the front with her clipboard and binder. "Everything I've done has been for the good of this community. My enhanced guidelines protect our property values." One by one, neighbors stood to share their experiences. Mrs. Peterson from Oak Street had been fined $800 for having insufficiently cheerful garden decor. Mr. Rodriguez had been cited for parking his work truck in his own driveway overnight. The Johnsons were fined for allowing their children's toys to remain visible in their backyard for more than 2 hours. As the stories stacked up, Karen's confidence drained away. She interrupted repeatedly, insisting each rule was necessary, but every explanation only made her sound more detached from reality. The final blow came when I stood and read her electric bill demand aloud, explaining how she had called 911 twice, trying to have me arrested for refusing to pay her personal utility costs. "This is what happens when someone forgets the limits of their authority," I said. Karen turned HOA leadership into a personal power trip, and it needs to stop. The vote was overwhelming. Karen was removed from the board by a vote of 43-2, with only herself and her next-door neighbor supporting her. But the consequences didn't end there. The Department of Real Estate concluded that Karen had violated multiple state regulations, creating unauthorized rules, collecting illegal fees, and misrepresenting her authority. The penalties were severe: a $15,000 fine for regulatory violations, plus $5,000 for each homeowner who had paid her unauthorized fees. Since 7 families had paid her over the years, her total penalty reached $50,000. She was also banned from serving on any HOA board in the state for 10 years and ordered to reimburse every homeowner affected by her actions. When the department agent read the penalties aloud at the follow-up meeting, Karen's face went ghostly pale. $50,000, she whispered. I don't have that kind of money. I was only trying to help the community.